Welcome to our All Candidates meeting for the 2015 federal election for the riding of Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes, which is a mouthful. But for our sake tonight, we are generally in North Grenville and surrounding areas. I want to welcome you all. Thank you all for coming out. I am your moderator for the evening. My name is David Shanahan, and I'm the editor of the North Grenville Times, which is the host and sponsor of the evening's events. This is, I think, one of the most important things we do as citizens, to be able to talk together and to talk with our candidates and those who have put themselves forward for election. I would hope that tonight would be a meeting where we are at home, where we treat people as guests in our home and honour them and respect them for the stand they're taking. Whether you agree with their party or not is irrelevant. They're putting themselves forward for our benefit. And I think we should welcome them here. And I'd like to name them. I was going to say from my extreme right, but I'll drop the extreme. Gord Brown, representing the Conservative Party. Margarat Andrade from the NDP. Lorraine Rekmans from the Green. And Jean McFall for the Liberal Party. The format tonight is relatively straightforward. Each of the candidates will have 3 minutes to speak in the first round on national issues, the issues they consider are of national importance. There will be time, if they wish, to discuss issues among themselves, and then the floor will be open for questions from the audience. We already have some questions that have been submitted online, and they'll be picked at random by me. If I see that there's a duplication in the question, or if I see that it's, to be honest, rude, aggressive, antagonistic, unnecessarily so, I'll put it aside. Those questions will be available for your study afterwards, just to confirm that I'm not being biased in any way in the choice. If you want to ask a question, there's a microphone available in the middle of the theatre, and we will have somebody there who will take care of it for you. You won't even have to turn it on. They'll take care of it for you. The idea of the evening is that this is as informal and informative as we can make it. We've gone out of our way, I think, to take care of all points of view. You will notice that the candidates each have a carafe of water in front of them, color-coded to their party. For those of you who care about such things, and many of you do, real glass. For those of you who think that's a total nonsense, the carafes are plastic. We cover all bases. I think we should start straight away with the candidates. They have drawn by lot the order in which they will speak, and being politicians, they've negotiated among themselves and changed the order. Yes, we're in their hands. First to speak is Lorraine Rekmans of the Green Party on national issues.
Thank you very much, David. I think it turned out well, in fact, that I go first, because I do have a cultural responsibility as an Indigenous woman to acknowledge the traditional territory of the people on which we're holding, the traditional territory where we're holding this meeting today. And it's a very important and significant thing in terms of remembering people and the places that they come from. So, thank you. I've been asked to identify 3 national issues of importance. I've been given 3 minutes. I would like to say that I believe that the economy, of course, is a very important issue, but I would not like to frame it in terms of being the economy. I would like to frame it in terms of being poverty. We know that 1/3 of Canadians are struggling. In fact, there was a report released today that talked about 1/3 of Canadians being unable to make a payment. We are in an economic recession, and we have low interest rates, and we know that when people miss payments at a time like this, it's an indicator of very difficult economic times. The Prime Minister himself has talked about this economy being fragile, being weak. In fact, he said, and he has warned us, that this economy could be cast into turmoil and chaos at any minute. So I think this is an indicator of where things are at. We talk about poverty. The Green Party has a platform to deal with poverty. It is a solution to poverty. It's called the Guaranteed Livable Income. I don't know how many people realize that this is a program that can be implemented in Canada because we are a wealthy country and we can pay out a citizen's dividend to every single Canadian to bring them above the poverty line and make sure that no Canadian lives in poverty. We have seen diminished federal transfers to the provinces in terms of health care. The feds used to contribute 50 cents on the dollar. Now it's 13 cents on the dollar, so we know that our healthcare system is under pressure. People are feeling the pinch at every turn in terms of affordable housing, affordable medication. The Greens are talking about pharmacare. We're talking about bringing in affordable medication for people because we know they're under stress. The second issue that I would like to talk about, I'm not sure how much time I have, I would like to talk about a democratic crisis, what I call bad governance. We are in a situation where we know that 27,000 people in this riding, and that is that's actually more than the entire population of North Grenville. 27,000 people did not vote. They dropped out. And I suggest that they dropped out because we are in a first-past-the-post system and they see that their vote is futile. The Greens are advocating for democratic reform. We support a mixed member proportional representation system. We believe that a percentage of votes in Canada should translate into a percentage of votes in the House of Commons. We know the Prime Minister's office is bigger than it's ever been. Okay, the third issue that I would say is a lack of commitment to future generations. And in that, I will talk about no commitment, no serious commitment in decades through a series of governments to actually address climate change and move to a greener, more innovative technology. Canada is finding itself lagging behind the rest of the world in terms of moving away from fossil fuels, and I think this is a disservice to the next generation.
The next speaker will be Margarat Andrade for the NDP.
Good evening, everyone. I'm fairly certain everybody can agree that the economy is probably the #1 issue, but like Lorraine, I will look at it from a different point of view. Poverty is very much a part of it. The unemployment across the country is alarming. In our riding alone, we have lost 20,000 good-paying jobs, and there are families that are struggling. But beyond that, because of the lack of growth in our economy, there is also an issue with affordable housing for seniors. Far too many seniors are living in poverty right now, and it's not acceptable. And then there are basic things like our healthcare and our education systems have been starved of money. It is very difficult to zero in on just one thing. The NDP platform, as a result, is very broad-based and is all interconnected in terms of pulling the entire country back up again. I don't think that we have much choice in looking for a change in this next election. I think that when you have a Prime Minister who has chosen to base the economy on the oil industry, I lived in Alberta for 10 years, and one of the first things, I'm sure little kids learn this at their mother's knee, you can never count on the oil industry because it is historically a boom and bust industry, and unfortunately right now we're in the bust part of it. I don't know how long it's going to take to recover, but it's certainly not going to reach the heights that it did previously anytime soon. You have to have a very broad-based economy in order to be able to have everybody in the country engaged and being able to take care of themselves. I think it's the loss of dignity for so many people that really, really bothers me. I talk to seniors who have to decide, am I going to pay for the hydro bill or am I going to get some food this month? I talk to young people. They've spent thousands of dollars getting their education, and they have nowhere to turn to try and find a job. And if they do, it has to be outside of our riding. There are very few opportunities here. I think we need to take a look at this riding on a broader scale and recognize the value that we have within this riding. And it's a reflection of what's happened across Canada. We have a very large seniors base. We have a large unemployment in this riding, and not a lot of innovation or investment. I would like to make sure that when we look at each of these issues later on during the evening, that you understand that the NDP is not looking just to make money and balance budgets. We will balance budgets, but it has to be within the total understanding of what everybody in the country needs.
Okay. We know where that was coming from now. That's good. The next to speak is Jean McFall for the Liberal Party.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here in Kemptville in North Grenville, and I'd like to thank the conveners for organizing this all-candidates meeting. It's really great to have the opportunity to interact with the voters and to let you know how we feel about what's going on out there in the world and about this election. In terms of national issues, I will tell you that the number one, I've been out knocking on doors essentially since about the middle of January, out talking to people, meeting them in all parts of the riding. The number one issue that they are articulating to me is that they are asking, what is your vision for Canada? And I would ask you, what is your vision for Canada? Canadians want their country back. That is what I'm hearing. That is the number one issue. Quite honestly, they're mad at their Prime Minister, they're mad at their government, and they're looking for new leadership. They're looking for compassion to be restored to government. Last night I was out knocking on doors in Marrickville, and we knocked on this man's door. He came to the door eventually with his cat, and we had a nice chat. And he said to me, you know, in the last election I voted Conservative, but I can't vote Conservative in this election because I don't see myself in this government. And when Canadians cannot identify with their government, it's time to change the government. The other issue that we hear, of course, out there in the world is the economy and jobs. Jobs all across the riding are an issue. In the last 10 years, Leeds and Grenville has lost thousands of manufacturing jobs. Right here in North Grenville, you have a boom in terms of population, but we do hear at the doorstep that jobs right here in North Grenville are still a concern. When 60% of two-income families are commuting, both parents, to Ottawa, and the kids are here, back here in North Grenville, they will tell you that they would be much happier if they could find meaningful work right here in North Grenville. Just, you know, 100 jobs lost through the loss of the closure of the Kemptville Agricultural College is such an example of that. So something needs to be done for Kemptville Agricultural College, and I know that because one of the halls there is called Purvis Hall, and it's named after my cousin Jim Purvis, who taught there for many years, and my family provided a bursary to the college for many years. And in the agriculture business in Eastern Ontario, Kemptville College really mattered, and it still does. So we've got to work on finding new uses for that campus and a new way forward with the economy of Leeds Grenville. Third and finally, I will say to you that we hear people say that they're concerned about cuts to government services, whether it's, you know, the veterans, the science people, 4,000 of them terminated, whether it's agriculture research, you name it. People are concerned about the level of service that they're getting from their government as a result of these cuts. So I would suggest to you that you can make your vote count and that you should vote for real change. And if you want to vote for real change, please vote for me, Jean McFall. Thank you.
Next is Gord Brown for the Conservative Party.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you to the North Grenville Times for putting tonight's meeting on, and of course thank you to all of you for coming out tonight. Our government's top priority, and my top priority since being elected, has been the economy. In our first few months in office, the late Jim Flaherty developed the Advantage Canada Plan. It was the first economic blueprint this country had seen in a decade. And thanks to that plan, the pillars were in place when the recession hit, massive amounts of debt had been paid down, and our government was well underway with plans to grow the economy, provide education and training, and build our infrastructure. The recession brought a razor focus to all of that. Of course, all parties agreed at the time that the government should go into deficit to help boost the economy. However, they disagreed on the method and the goals. We focused on jobs, training, the economy, infrastructure, and our plan proved fruitful and did not create a structural deficit. This year, as promised, we have a balanced budget, and it was balanced without cutting funding for social services such as healthcare. In fact, transfers to the province of Ontario have increased 88% since we took office in 2006, and this includes $13.1 billion for health. As reported last month, our economy has created 1.3 million net new jobs since 2009, and that's 1.3 million new jobs above what we had before the recession. We returned to surplus last fiscal year, and as of last month, we are carrying a surplus of $5 billion so far this year, even with the dramatic drop in oil prices. Federal taxes are the lowest they have been in 50 years. We are on the right track. However, we're not immune to outside economic pressures. Lower oil prices, failing and faltering economies around the world all affect us as we are a trading nation. Jobs in the economy will continue to be our focus in the future. Our current infrastructure program is the largest and longest such program ever introduced by the federal government, dramatically higher than it was under the former Liberal government, and as well, security for our way of life is a top priority for us here at home and abroad. We have passed many bills to protect our safety and the safety of our families while punishing criminals, not hard-working Canadians. We have taken a strong stand on the world stage. We will defend the right of peoples around the world to live in a peaceful democracy. We've bolstered our armed forces to ensure that they have the training and the tools that they need to do their jobs. And despite what you read in the press, people around the world know where Canada stands on the issues that affect the globe. We will also continue to work on behalf of those Canadians who require help, from parents with critically ill children to those suffering from dementia and autism. We will continue to commit resources to finding the causes and the cures, while at the same time relieving caregivers' financial burdens and stress. Meanwhile, we've also committed massive amounts of money to preserving our own natural and cultural resources, and will continue to do this into the future.
Thank you. Before we go on to questions from the audience, we'd like to invite the candidates, if they wish, to comment or enter a discussion. If you want to just turn on your lights and leave them on, if you want to take part, feel free. Lorraine.
Yes, with all due respect, I have to disagree that I don't believe that this current government is doing a good job. We have a $600 billion national debt. And we paid out, just in 2011, we paid out $37 billion in interest to the private sector. So a balanced budget has come, I believe, at the expense of serious services and programs. We know that First Nations, who are the most vulnerable in this country, who have 164 communities that don't have safe drinking water, yet the Aboriginal Affairs budget went unspent. We know that veteran funds were in surplus at the end of the year, and veterans have been denied services. So with the low taxes that have been offered, those low taxes, the cuts that we've seen have resulted in diminished services, and I think every Canadian can attest to that. With respect to doing a good job in terms of our international reputation, it hasn't been up until this last decade. It has been only since this last decade. The Canadians are being humiliated in international fora, and we're receiving things like the Fossil of the Year award because we're not moving to greener technologies.
Okay. I respect what Gord has said. I respect what my other colleagues have said. But the question that I have is that if the Conservative way has been so phenomenally good, then why do we have so much unemployment in our country? Why do we have so many people who are suffering? I have a really hard time understanding how anybody can see that when you have seniors, when you have young children, and when you have the youth who are not being given an opportunity to get ahead in life, I don't understand how you can say that your government has been a success. I don't understand how a government can carry a deficit over so many years and claim victory at having a surplus one year on the backs of the most vulnerable in our country. Mr. Harper has told us that we won't recognize Canada by the time he's finished, and he is dead right. You know, Canada perceives itself as a country of compassion, of care, and yet we're ready to stand up and fight for what we believe in. I have an incredible measure of pride for the military, and yet the military it's been so underfunded. They have, I can't even get the words out. The equipment that they have is substandard. There has not been enough money put into that issue. The veterans of all ages, not just our senior veterans, but of all ages, the Afghanistan vets, have not received the respect that they should. I'm sorry, but when you put your life on the line and go and fight for our country, you shouldn't have to keep going back to prove that your legs haven't grown back like that one gentleman who has to go every year. You know, and the Conservatives shake their heads and say, oh, Margaret, you're a bleeding heart. No, I'm not a bleeding heart. I'm fiscally conservative, but I also believe it's time that we take back our Canada and understand that the bottom line is not the only line. That the line that helps the most vulnerable in our country live a life of dignity is a far more important line.
Well, I might as well weigh in here as well. Just to comment on no structural deficit, I think that it's pretty clear, given that this is the first surplus that's been run since the surpluses that the Liberals created at the beginning of the Harper government, that there has been a structural deficit. And I would suggest to you that you can't cut your way to prosperity. We need leadership from the federal government to help this stumbling economy come forward. There have been 2 recessions in the last 9 years, and the most recent one declared in the last quarter. So I think we definitely need to see some leadership in that regard. As to infrastructure, the Liberal plan is to double the infrastructure investment that's currently in place from $65 billion to $125 billion, adding $60 billion to it to create jobs, jumpstart the economy, and bring Canada into the 21st century. There's been an ongoing infrastructure deficit that needs to be addressed, and I would suggest to you that leadership is going to make that happen, and that we can make that happen through the new Liberal government. Thanks.
First of all, the cuts to health care happened under the Liberal government. They're the only government back in the 1990s that actually cut health care funding. They dramatically cut health care funding by $25 billion. And that's how they balanced the budget back in the 1990s. We have balanced the budget without cutting those transfers and increasing those transfers to the point now where they have increased 88% in the province of Ontario since 2006. Now, if you think about that, that's nearly double the amount of money that was going in 2006 to the province of Ontario for health care. Now, at the same time, the province has not been increasing its health care budget at the same level, but they have been wasting money on things like e-health, the Orange Air Ambulance scandal, money that's being wasted on our healthcare system that's not serving the people yet. They continue to get those transfers from the province increased very dramatically. As for the jobs in this riding, many of the manufacturing jobs were lost in the 1990s, but they weren't just lost here, they were lost throughout the Western world to some of the other countries in other parts of the world with much lower labor rates. There's no magic bullet on economic development, but I can tell you there's 2 things that will grow economic development, and that's infrastructure money, and we have had literally hundreds of millions of dollars of infrastructure money in this riding delivered, and economic development money, and we've had many, many millions that have come through the Eastern Ontario Development Program, a fund that I advocated for, that has served our communities well, has created jobs, and continues to work, and continues to grow the economy here in Leeds and Grenville.
With all due respect, I think the federal government certainly has a responsibility to demonstrate leadership. What the Green Party is proposing is to look at the demographics in the province and start reviewing the fiscal transfers to look at the aging populations across Canada and make sure that those health transfers are actually meeting the need on the ground. So what we know about our demographics is we have a very large youth population that is unemployed. In fact, their rate of unemployment is 2 times the national average. And we have an aging population that is going to put pressure on our healthcare system. And leadership is not about blaming the provinces and their failures. Leadership is about setting national standards for healthcare, coming out with a national senior strategy, a national housing strategy, and the pharmacare program. The future is now. We think that the Green Party might be a party for the future, but the future has come faster than we thought it was going to come. We have innovation now that we never thought we could imagine in our lifetime. In fact, they have a factory that's producing medicinal marijuana in Smith Falls. This is something that people probably they never thought they would ever see in terms of the future, and I just want to tell you that time flies.
It's on. The problem, Mr. Brown, with what you're saying is that my family moved here in 2008, and it was after we moved that we saw, I think it was 4 different plants that closed down. There may have been a lot more plants in the 1990s that were here, but since 2008, since we moved here, there's been an awful lot of jobs lost again. So I don't really buy into that theory at all. As for the amount of money that you guys have poured into healthcare, or, you know, and you're right, it was the Liberals that gutted a lot of things just to create this surplus, which then again, the Conservatives promptly lost or used up. I don't feel that you're being completely honest with people in this riding. When you have food bank usage in Brockville, Mallorytown, and Elizabethtown, Kitley that has gone from about 5,000 families a month 5 years ago to over 15,000, a year, over 15,000 a year at this point, there's something very, very wrong with the picture. Maybe you've poured a lot of money into this riding. I haven't seen much of it, and I really don't think most of the people in this riding have seen it either.
It's interesting to hear, we do hear at the door comments about the Ontario government and, you know, what is going on there with healthcare and education and so on, but I would suggest to you that this is a federal election. On the other hand, I do think that the relationship between the Ontario government and the federal government needs to be addressed. It's really been a very negative relationship for quite some time. As to healthcare, it would be good if the federal government would convene a premier's meeting on just about anything, but in particular on healthcare, which hasn't happened in the 9 years that Mr. Harper has been the Prime Minister. In terms of stats, I think I must be looking at different websites, Gord, because it's my understanding that just as the Ontario government would become eligible for certain transfer payments, something in the range of $600 billion, the system got changed so that they were no longer eligible for it. And I would welcome you to go on and Google that. And it's true, between 2008 and 2010, all you have to do is search the Recorder website and you'll see several thousand jobs lost in the area. And I think it really is a worry, and you can't just put it back on the government from before. You have to take some responsibility for it.
When people are running to be the Member of Parliament, I think that the people of the riding expect honesty in numbers, and just making it up on the fly is not what the people of this riding expect. And I can tell you, after having served for 11 years, people would have held me to account if I was just making up numbers as I went along. But the fact is that we have been creating jobs in this riding. The help wanted ads have been increasing quite dramatically. There are jobs that are at many different plants. And I challenge the candidates who want to talk about the plants that have closed. There is one plant that did close in Brockville, the Abbott plant. And I can tell you, I went to bat to try to get the government to support them and keep them in our riding. That plant is now going to be having a new company in there, but the fact is that they had other ideas of where they were taking those jobs. They were not going to keep them in our area, and there was nothing that I could do, or any Member of Parliament could do, because they had already made up their mind. But in terms of the infrastructure, I could go on all night rhyming off all of the infrastructure funds that have come into this riding. In fact, the Port of Johnstown, the Greenfield ethanol plant. We've got, right here in North Grenville, we've got Grenville Mutual moved here. We've got the Tallman Truck Center building a new plant. We have many, many projects throughout the riding, and I'll be happy to rhyme them off a little more in the local section. I know this part was more about national issues, but I'll be happy to go over them then.
Okay, I think we want to move to questions from the audience as well. If you want to ask a question at the microphone, it's up there in the middle. I'll take that. Yeah, it's up there in the middle if you want to line up at some point. In the meantime, I'll take some questions here. One that came up, and it came up in the discussion already, regarding veterans. There have been a few questions on this area. One person emailed in to say that they were 35 years in the Canadian military, now over 70. They're concerned because the government have closed various Veterans Affairs offices, changed the amount that they pay for public servants' health care plan, and the general feeling is that the veterans are being given a hard time of it. The question really is, if you get elected, what do you see your party doing to change this and to help veterans generally? Would anyone like to just get started with that?
Sure.
We'll work our way across.
Well, the Liberal Party has come out with a pretty clear platform relative to veterans. The first thing I'd like to say is that they would like to restore respect for the men and women who have gone to war and fought on behalf of our freedom, especially most recently those who've gone to Afghanistan and the other combats that have occurred in recent years. You know, I've been out knocking on doors, as I say, and I knocked on a door of a gentleman who lives in Brockville, who the other day handed me this recent copy of Legion magazine, and in it there's a very interesting article entitled Cracks in the System, and it describes the experience of a veteran named Bruce Monker, who was hit by friendly fire in Afghanistan in 2006. And he had 5% of his brain kind of lying out on the sands of Kandahar. And when he was put back together again and went to the to Veterans Affairs Canada for compensation, the question basically became, what is the price of 5% of your brain? And the answer at the time in 2008 was $22,000. Because the fact is you can't get a pension anymore under the current system. The Liberal Party would restore that. It took him 7 years to get compensation of over $300,000, the maximum you can get. I presume because he battled that entire time with Veterans Affairs Canada. You know, the government, they're very happily and gladly sent him to war in order to get the proper compensation he needed for rehabilitation for post-traumatic stress disorder and the other, and memory loss and the other ailments that he suffered as a result of this brain injury. I don't think that any of us think that that is acceptable, and that's what needs to change. And so bringing back the opportunity, the option for receiving a pension as opposed to a payout at the very beginning of your experience as a veteran, that has to happen. We have to reopen the 9 veterans offices that were closed, and we have to pay that kind of respect that people are expecting for the men and women who go to war and fight on behalf of our freedom. Thanks.
I think never before in the history of this country have we seen a prime minister that is so eager to align himself with the image of military force, posing in pictures with military equipment and waving to the crowd. Yet those cuts, I mean, to the veterans, as I mentioned earlier, show a lack of compassion for the commitment, a lack of respect for what Canadians give to this country. It's, I think it's shameful. The Green Party is certainly committed to reinvesting in veterans, in making sure that those offices are reopened and that those services are provided to the people who have given so much to this country. Again, I have to point to, in the middle of an election, that a government who stands up proudly and says they have balanced the budget and, oh gee, look, we have a surplus too in unspent Veterans Affairs money is unacceptable. Canadians deserve better. Canadians want better. And I suggest that we are at a critical time. Oh, sorry, I'm done.
Veterans deserve respect, so the NDP government would open all of the veterans offices that had been closed. We will fix the Veterans Charter, and we will fix the Review and Appeal Board so all veterans are treated fairly. But I think this is my opportunity to let you know that the NDP believes that the #1 priority for our military is to defend our country, and that's obvious and not something that can be disagreed with. But the other thing that the NDP also believes is that if there is a NATO-sanctioned or a UN-sanctioned mission, Canada would step up and fulfill its part. There seems to be a misconception that the NDP will avoid war at any cost. And I had a long conversation when I was door knocking with a veteran. Actually, he is with the military right now. And he was concerned that after spending so many years of his life as a committed member to the military, was his life just going to be peacekeeping? I'm done? All right.
I don't think there's a person in the room that doesn't think that we need to respect our veterans. The fact is that Veterans Affairs Canada has changed its focus very much over the last number of years from being focused on our Second World War veterans to those veterans who have come home from Afghanistan. And I can tell you that it was probably one of the hardest things for me as a member of Parliament was to go and actually vote to put our proud men and women of our armed forces in harm's way in Afghanistan to help protect our way of life. All parties voted for the new Veterans Charter a number of years ago. Obviously, there has been some issues in terms of changing that focus to dealing with PTSD. It was something that hadn't really been dealt with in many, many years. The offices and the services that are offered at those 9 offices that Veterans Affairs had are offered in Member of Parliament's offices and in Service Canada across the country. My office actually offered to go to the homes of people who needed those services, but in addition to that, we have now, or we're opening up a new PTSD clinic at the Brockville Mental Health Centre in Brockville, so people here will be able to access those services just down the road.
We have a question in the audience. Jim?
This question is directed towards Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown, as a resident of Ontario, you're surely aware of how our province's Liberal government has made Ontario #1 in many areas. We are now the most indebted non-national government in the world because of feckless provincial Liberal spending. We have the highest electricity prices in North America, #1 there. Provincial policy has driven hundreds of thousands of good jobs from Ontario, a rate of destruction which exceeds all other provinces put together. What, Mr. Brown, do you think the result of Mr. Justin Trudeau's Liberal tax and spend policies at the federal level, including a copy of Ontario's new carbon tax, will be when piled up on top of existing Liberal measures at the provincial level?
Well, thank you for that question, because we all know the challenges that we're facing in the province of Ontario. And it may not be an issue that is federal, but it could become an issue that will be increasingly federal if there's a new carbon tax that will increase the cost of energy over and above what they already are. As I go door to door, the people tell me that one of their biggest challenges is to pay that hydro bill every month. And in addition, today we just heard that the Liberal leader said that, or in fact, the numbers were calculated on the platform of the Liberal Party, and they would be running a $26 billion deficit this year, increasing up to about a $35 billion deficit. So we see the impact that having a massive deficit in the province of Ontario and the issue of the energy prices and what that's doing, that's causing a lot of problems for our manufacturers and our job creators. It's one of the biggest issues that I hear from our job creators and our companies, that they are facing such massive energy prices, and it is in fact chasing manufacturing out of our province.
I think everybody would like to reply to that as well, so a minute each.
Okay, well, I'll reply to that. Thank you for that question. It's interesting to hear that the Liberal government in Ontario is on trial here. I would suggest to you I would suggest to you that it is that we are in structural deficit at the federal level, and the Liberal Party has lost its funding partner. And I do think that the federal government is going to have to step up, meet with the provinces, have proper discussion, find out from them what their needs are, and properly address those needs. Is it a sign that the lights just went out? Did you pay the hydro? So yes, we do need investment. We need investment in infrastructure. I would suggest to you it's not going to be that kind of deficit, and that the deficit will be reduced down to zero and go into surplus by 2019. We do need leadership at the federal level. We need that infrastructure investment, and we need to make it happen, and I'll be fighting really hard for Leeds Grenville's fair share of that when the time comes. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I think, geez, if electricity that's generated by nuclear power is too expensive, maybe it's time to transition to something a little greener and more innovative. The good thing about being with the Green Party is we get to watch and learn from the mistakes of the other big three. You know, it's a good place to be in terms of getting ready for the future, is watching what's happened in the past. And being green doesn't mean let's blame everybody for all the bad things that happen. Being green is saying let's put some optimism out there and let people know we can move forward. If what we're doing isn't working, then it's time for us to change. And we can change. We know that Germany has seen economic growth because it shifted to clean energy technologies. The Green Party is talking about a fee on carbon, and we know that it's a tax and it works. We know that if we tax behavior that we don't want, people will stop doing it. And what we're proposing is paying a dividend out to every Canadian from that tax.
I think you have to look at the entire picture. Ontario has become a have-not province, and it was for many, many decades a have province. There has been mismanagement from the Ontario government, and then there has been an absolute reluctance of the federal government to engage with the premiers to discuss these sorts of issues and to get everybody back on track. And I find that this is the biggest problem. I've driven across this country several times. It's a very regionalized country. It's a gorgeous country, but each region has very different needs. You need a prime minister who is going to sit down with each of those premiers and discuss the differences, the different needs that they have. As Lorraine says, blaming. It's a bit late for it, folks. Let's get together. Let's do this. I believe that investing in green energy is going to be the only answer we have, because we have committed to ending oil usage within the century.
Thank you. I will take another question from the microphone.
I'd like to bring this back to a more local riding level and talk about trade vis-a-vis agriculture.
We will be talking about local issues later on, if you want to hold on.
Okay, I can do that.
That's good of you. Thank you.
I just wanted to ask a question about the future, because there's a lot of young people in this riding, and I think their future is at stake. So my question is, this riding has the highest youth out-migration in Ontario. It's very sad. Sorry, okay, can you hear me now? Okay. So, as I mentioned, I want to sort of talk about the future, not the past, and I'm very tired of the blame game. It goes nowhere. And the party that's in power has to take responsibility. End of story, okay? But our concern now is the future of our children and other people's children, because I want a good retirement, to be honest. Anyway, so our riding has the highest youth out migration in Ontario, which is kind of shocking. And I'd like to know what you will do as an MP to address this. What will you do for this riding
Okay, Lorraine,
Okay.
you got your hand up first.
Okay, I'm a small business owner, and I realize that small business in Canada provides employment for almost 48% of Canada's workforce. Our little company's created 5 full-time local jobs. It's not, but what the Green Party platform is proposing is to look at infrastructure investment and then building a sustainable generation fund and marrying the two. So that addresses youth migration. It's looking at rebuilding infrastructure in the community, providing youth employment and training incentives. So it isn't just about getting our youth working, it's about where we get them working. And we, you know, and my personal commitment and part of the Green Party platform is about building strong families and strong communities and not separating families so that youth run off to chase resource development jobs in a boom and bust economy.
Job creation for youth is the same as job creation overall. What we need to do is attract jobs here, and in order to do that, as I said before, we need to invest in infrastructure, which we're doing. We need to have economic development money, which we have had. We need to continue on that track. There are a lot of people in Leeds and Grenville who are working on economic development. There are excellent people working in the various municipalities for the counties, our MPP, and others who are all committed to improving the economy and bringing jobs to our area. They work well together. There is things happening. There is a lot of positive things happening in our area. Look at what the growth that's happening right here in North Grenville. Look at the manufacturing growth that's happening right around the Port of Johnstown. All of that has come through federal infrastructure investments, especially down at the Port of Johnstown, and investing in our tourism economy. All of this is creating the jobs that will keep our youth here.
I think this is a very relevant question. Our youth are facing double-digit unemployment. They earn less and carry more debt than their parents did. The NDP will restore the federal minimum wage and raise it to $15 an hour. We will create quality jobs in small businesses in green industries. And this is where a lot of our youth are much more in tune than us oldies are. They believe in the green industries and they understand it on a global level. We will give interns the same protections as other workers. And this is important because for a lot of the youth, the only way to gain experience is through working as an intern. And unfortunately, it's mostly young women who are taken advantage of in that intern position. And we will make life more affordable for young people by investing in childcare, housing, and transit. And that's it. Thanks.
Well, since this is the national issues section of the discussion, I'm going to focus a little bit on the Liberal platform for young people. It entails spending $1.3 billion over 3 years, not 10 years, but over 3 years, which is 13 times more than the NDP is planning to spend, creating 40,000 youth jobs per year through an youth employment strategy, including 5,000 jobs for youth in parts of Canada, which of course is great for the green, if you know what I mean, and $40 million for employer co-op placements, which gets them the kind of experience they're going to need in order to get jobs out there in the world. We've got lots of young people involved in our campaign, people who've never been out canvassing before in their lives, and they're saying to us that they're looking for change and they want to have a say in the future of this country. So just last but not least, the Liberals would bring back a modernized youth service program for work experience and travel throughout Canada. Katimavik was what it was once known as. Thank you.
Thanks, Gord. Before we go to this one, this question was submitted from the floor, and it is for everyone. It is a national question, but with clear local interests, I'm sure. What will your party do to get our economy less reliant on the oil and gas industry and more in line with the rest of the world? I'm going to start with Gord and work across.
Thank you. I think that we all support renewables. In fact, in Ottawa, I have been the chair of the Renewable Fuels Caucus, and that has been very successful for our riding, specifically the new ethanol plant of the Greenfield Specialty Alcohols ethanol plant down at the Port of Johnstown. Now that plant not only has created direct manufacturing jobs, but it has created a market for the corn for our farmers. In addition to that, it has had a dramatic decrease in the amount of greenhouse gas emissions emitted. The ethanol that's produced at that plant is the equivalent of taking 58,000 cars off the road. That is real environmental improvement. Our government has committed to clean tech. There has been a great deal of money invested in new technologies across our country. We have reduced greenhouse gas emissions. My time's up.
I would have to say that everybody believes that we are going to have to turn toward greener technologies, and the NDP is fully supportive of that. What I am most proud of is the innovation tax credit. This is a very important element. When you look at a company like Nuterra here in over in Brockville, they started out in their garage. They're a company that do water purification on a large scale. And now they have 2 of the empty industrial buildings in Brockville. They have built up a company that is very, very impressive. These are the things that we need to see more of, and we need to see more of it in green technologies. The ethanol plant is a great start, but gosh, wouldn't it be great if we had 4 of them and we could supply Canada with these kind of plants? I think that the cost of electricity, we have to turn to solar power. It is the most efficient way to create electricity, and it also has the least imprint. Okay.
Oh, the first thing that our party would do is admit that climate change is real and bring our scientists back. We know the challenges that face us as a country, and we know that we can't take action alone, but we can show leadership as federal MPs. The Green Party is proposing that we create a Council of Canadian Governments and we bring all levels of government to the table and work in partnership, something that hasn't happened for decades. We want to bring provinces, municipalities, First Nations, Inuit, Métis people, and the feds to the table to look at solutions. So we could talk about fiscal transfers and what they mean in terms of how they're going to meet the objectives that we set out as a country. We want to set an agenda that everyone can buy into and support. We're going to invest in a transportation strategy. We are going to invest in renovation tax credits.
I totally agree that it's time to stop denying the science and recognize that climate change is real. And when the Liberal Party is elected to form the next government, the first thing on the agenda is to go to the UN Climate Change Summit in Paris and take the premiers with Mr. Trudeau and acknowledge that and get busy working on what really matters to try to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and address the issues that surround climate change. I would say to you that it's my understanding that greenhouse gas emissions were reduced in the province of Ontario, not because of the federal government, but because the Liberal government actually closed the coal-fired plants, and that's why the greenhouse gas emissions were reduced. One of the 3 prongs of the infrastructure plan that the Liberals have promoted is clean technology. We don't have to sacrifice jobs in order to have clean technology. We can build our economy and build clean jobs all at the same, or put clean jobs into place all at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take another question from the floor. I should just say in passing, I appreciate the fact that these have to be short answers. We have a bowl full of questions to ask, and I'm sure there's more coming in, and we haven't even got on to local issues yet. So we'll try and get through as many questions as possible and cover as many issues as we can. So we appreciate the speed with which things are going through. Next question at the mic, please.
Thank you. I would like to know if you believe that Canadian farmers and consumers should be consulted before new genetically modified crops and foods are approved, and would you support mandatory labeling of these so Canadians can make informed decisions about what they're putting in their bodies?
Mary Jean, do you want to start there? We'll move across this way.
Sure. Just digesting the question, so to speak. Thank you for the question. I would say to you that, of course, Canadians ought to be consulted, and of course, Canadians ought to be offered information based on science to make decisions about the food they put in their bodies and the food that they feed their children. It's very, very important. Agriculture research is one of the cuts that's been made by the federal government, and in speaking with farmers even just today, it's a real concern. You can see the advantages, the benefits that come from research and the quality of the food that we are presented to eat. GMOs are definitely an issue, and I would have to understand better what the implications of labeling would be, but in the overall, I think that the food industry needs to be as transparent as possible, and from that perspective, yes, I do support labeling of GMOs. Thank you.
It's certainly a commitment that the Green Party has made, but we go a little bit further in terms of addressing food security. We are talking about re-examining the entire agricultural model. So we know our food distribution networks are vulnerable because the food production systems are so concentrated. It's a concern, and what we're finding is that we are right here in an agricultural community, but we don't have local food produced and provided to hungry people. That's why they're using the food banks. So you have to ask yourself, how do we make those connections between food production and food provision at the local community level? The Greens are committed to investing in local food production and looking at food security in a serious way by re-examining the agricultural model. So we need smaller farms, and we're prepared to invest in family farms.
I have a little bit of a different perspective on this. 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with cancer, and from that point on, I had to start really examining what I was eating. I am also diabetic, so I happen to be fortunate enough that I was discovered to be diabetic after the nutritional labeling came in. It is still not clear enough labeling, and we need to have far more information, not only on what is in the products that we are purchasing, but where they come from and how they are produced. I was having an interesting conversation with my son last night. He was talking about ginseng and a particular cold therapy, and he said, well, it's all the same thing. And I said, well, no, there's different methods of manufacturing that ginseng. And these are the kind of details that I think that are extremely important. The NDP has a national food strategy that we're going to roll out, and the most important part of that is the quality of the food that Canadians are eating. It is we can talk about it later.
Thank you for that question. I think that we should be all proud of what's been going on locally in terms of our farmers markets, with the Local Flavors program that's been supported by the Eastern Ontario Development Program, as well as the new food hub in Smiths Falls, which actually serves all of our region, another project that's been supported by the Eastern Ontario Development Program. But as for the question, I think we need to work with consumers, we need to work with our food producers, and be as transparent as possible.
Okay, there are people at the mic and there's lots of questions, but at the same time we want to move on to local issues soon. So what I'd like to do, maybe take one more question from the mic, then we'll maybe take a 5-minute break, give you a chance to stretch your legs, and then we'll come back with local issues. Anybody who's at the mic at this point, if you want to When we return to questions from the floor, you will get priority. So one more question, please.
Actually, this question is for Margaret in regards to taxes. Dennis Hewlett from the Canadian Tax Federation and Canadians for Tax Fairness claims that Canada loses billions of dollars every year to tax havens. The Conservative government is very, very good at doing everything in their power to ensure that they don't collect taxes properly, and they've done everything in their power to ensure that any obstacles are put in place to ensure that it's not done. What would the NDP do in regards to tax havens, and how would you collect the taxes that are owed to Canadians but not collected or even paid attention to by the current government right now?
Thank you for the question. That's a very relevant question. In our framework, the budget framework that we released this week, the NDP made it clear that it's time to close some of the particular tax loopholes that are giving the top 1% perhaps a more unfair advantage. The tax havens issue has also been brought up, and that, of course, is something that we need to become much stronger on. We are losing an incredible amount of money from our economy for that, and I fully support my party's position on that. If you're going to earn money and you're going to have the benefits of what Canada has to offer, then I honestly believe that you should be paying the taxes as well. Tax havens it hurts everybody in our country and in our economy.
Gord, you want to go next? And then Lorraine and Andrade.
I think we all expect that taxpayers pay the taxes that are due, and that we ensure that tax loopholes are closed as much as possible. As well, that we make sure that we have enough auditors in place. And the government has hired more tax auditors. I know that's not what every small business person wants to hear, but the reality is that we should be working to make sure that all tax that's owed is paid. And I know that it has been part of our economic action plan to work towards doing away with tax avoidance.
I like to think of Canadians as people who are all traveling in the same canoe. And I think that tax havens are like having a leak in our boat. The Green Party is proposing a tax system overhaul. I mean, we understand that Canadians believe in fair taxation and we're prepared to pay tax. But we expect on the other end that those services are going to be there. We don't want to be taxed for things that we aren't receiving. We are committed to looking at how taxes are paid. We understand that we've got to remove taxes from the poorest of the poor. We're in a situation now where we have 1% of the people who have most of the wealth and 99% of the people who don't. So we have to ask ourselves, is our tax system working? And I think we can come up with an answer. It's no. So we are committed to looking at taxes in a serious way. We're looking at fiscal transfers and how the tax system should work. Thank you.
Specific to your question, the Canada Revenue Agency needs to be properly funded. So if you're looking for enforcement, you have to have people who can enforce the rules, let's face it. So again, when you go through cutbacks and fire a whole bunch of civil servants, they can't enforce the rules because they're not there or they're completely backed up. I do also think there needs to be a refocus towards proper fair enforcement and a diversion away from clamping down on political activism when the activist agenda does not align with the government's. And I think that's one thing the CR is doing. Fairness in the tax system, I would suggest to you that the Liberal plan to raise the tax on the top 1% a little bit, ask them to pay a little bit more so that we can give middle-class Canadians a break and help grow the middle class accordingly, is very much realigning the tax system to where it belongs. In addition, the Liberal Party is going to put more money in the hands of hardworking Canadians whose time is up, and we'll tell you about it later.
Thank you. I think we will take a 5-minute break, give people a chance to move around a bit, and then we'll come back with local issues and very much the same format. Thank you. For the sake of speed and efficiency, you will notice I'm picking through questions. I'm not actually choosing which questions. I'm taking out the ones that have already been asked, and any that are purely national and not local. I hope that's okay with everybody. The ones I'm taking out are here. You can come and check them afterwards if you don't trust me, but why wouldn't I? Thank you. Okay, we want to move on to the area of local issues, and local issues primarily meaning not just the riding but North Grenville, and we'll stick to that geographical area as much as possible in this case. We're going to start again with short statements from each of the candidates and then move into questions from the public. The original idea was to try and wrap up around 9 o'clock or shortly, very shortly thereafter. That means we want to give maximum time to questions and answers. So after the statements by the candidates, we'll go straight to the questions. And this time, the first up is Gord Brown.
Thank you. Jobs and the economy are the most important thing in this election, and they're the most important thing right here in North Grenville as well. We've got the mayor of Merrickville-Wolford here, Dave Nash, so it's also important there. I've been working with the mayor and the council to help solve a number of issues in the community and help build the economy here. I regularly met with the municipal council and attended council meetings, and I want to thank the council with working with me to provide federal constituency services right here in North Grenville. From the Herd Bridge that was rebuilt with federal infrastructure money to the new library that now proudly anchors a rejuvenated downtown core to work on County Road 43, to the recent announcement of $100,000 to rejuvenate the Kemptville Armory, our government has played a large role in the building, rebuilding, and rehabilitation of Kemptville, and of course, there is the additional $45 million investment in the Rideau Canal. Kemptville and the North Grenville area in general is the envy of many communities in Eastern Ontario. Being the fastest growing community, its potential is unlimited. However, with that growth comes infrastructure issues, some that we've thought about and that we can see now, and some that we will face suddenly. For example, while there has been much work accomplished on County Road 43, there will be more required. For many decades, the low bridge over Kemptville Creek has been a thorn in the side of those who want the downtown core linked to the Rideau waterway for larger boats. The traffic density along the road from increased shopping opportunities and increased housing development will require a long-range plan for sustainable growth. Commuter traffic from County Road 43 onto the 416 has increased substantially in the past decade. I was also working with the mayor and councillors and what applies in terms of the applications that they're making for County Road 43. And of course, the biggest local issue that many of you want to talk about is the fact that the province of Ontario closed Kemptville Agricultural College. I was really disappointed when I learned that they were doing it in such a high-handed fashion and that they didn't even hold a meeting with the local community until after the decision was made. And they really didn't seem to care what the college meant to this immediate area in the entire region. Selling off a prize herd and turning their backs on a century of service to the community was despicable. I've thrown my support behind our MPP, Steve Clark, and the North Grenville community and the greater Eastern Ontario rural agricultural community while everyone worked at finding solutions. And right now I've been working with the municipality here. They have applied through the Eastern Ontario Development Program, through our CFDCs for assistance to come up with a plan that can help put jobs back into that facility. And much of that money that does come is, of course, through that Eastern Ontario Development Program that I advocated so strongly for to make sure that we had that money in cases like this when we needed support to come up with a new plan.
Next up is Mary Jean.
As to local issues, I would agree that the economy and jobs are a really big concern around here. As I mentioned, 60% of two-income families their parents are traveling to Ottawa and the kids are here back at school. So that is definitely an issue. The youth unemployment rate is more than 20%. It's almost double the provincial average. We need to it's by far higher than the provincial average. So yes, we do need to reinvent our economy and focus ourselves in a new direction. The challenges of population growth, that's the infrastructure, those are the infrastructure issues. It's roads and bridges, it's a bridge over Kemptville Creek when you go to 4 lanes on County Road 43, all those sorts of things. Also cell phone and internet service, especially in the countryside. I do want to comment on two things. As to the Rideau Canal, yes, there's been what I'll describe as too little too late in terms of addressing the infrastructure deficit there that was created in the last few years. It's about $119 million short, and that's troubling. And not to mention the operating budget has been cut by 20%, and that's troubling. And I've consulted with people across the riding who are very concerned about the Rideau Canal, and those investments are going to have to, we're going to have to invest more, let's face it, to bring it back. As to the Kemptville Agricultural College, I also mentioned my concerns about that, and I would dispute the notion that there was no consultation, because I actually attended the open house that Lyle Van Cleef held in Kemptville at the school. At the end of his consultation process, there must have been 200 people in the room, and they asked a number of questions and made their views heard. And it was very much, they were seeing the writing on the wall, and they're very much looking to the transition from what Kemptville was, which was a respected agricultural college in the province of Ontario, to a new future, whether it's a rural studies location or we bring jobs from Agriculture Canada, from Ottawa to Kemptville. These are the sorts of things we are going to have to look long and hard at, and there's going to have to be real mediation, facilitated discussion between the municipality and the province, which seems to be stalled at this point in time, and somebody's got to step up and do that. And as your member of parliament, I'd be very honored to step up and do that, because I can say from my own family's experience that the agricultural school in Kemptville has been a very important and necessary asset to agriculture in Eastern Ontario. So there has been consultation, and consultation will have to go on, and we're going to have to look to the big picture, you know, do some out-of-the-box thinking, and make sure that that great asset for this community is maintained. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret.
I think that one of the things you have to understand is that I come here with fresh thinking. I have a vision for this riding, and instead of looking for the Kemptville people, the North Grenville people, to be having to go into Ottawa, I want to turn the focus, back into the riding. It seems to me that one of the best ways for us to move ahead in this riding would be to encourage things like research and development, innovation. There certainly are a number of technology companies in Ottawa. Why would we not approach them and have them set up in our region so that their business costs are lower and their employees would be able to live in an area that is much less expensive and not have the huge commute? It's great to look at changing, you know, making that suburban area more full of pavement, more transportation more accessible by car. But the problems with that are that we can't afford to lose valuable agricultural land. If we have a food strategy where Canada is going to continue to provide the highest quality of food, and our riding, 3/4 of our riding is agricultural, we have to understand that this is an extremely important part of our riding. I would suggest that it's time for this riding to look at commuter trains. When I've had to go and see specialists, when seniors have to go to different doctors, either Kingston or Ottawa, it's very difficult to drive these distances. It also makes me crazy watching all the people driving on the 416, going to jobs in Ottawa. And in the wintertime, you see the number of accidents, the number of deaths that we have. Let's really take a hard, good look at commuter transit. Instead of looking out, we should be looking into this riding. I want to create a Leeds and Grenville mark of excellence, a quality of product and innovation and research here in Leeds and Grenville. And I don't think that we need to be making it easier for people to leave the riding, but rather bring things into the riding so that we can continue to have our youth living here with good jobs. Our people, the middle class, will have good jobs as well. I think that it's time to flip it over. It's time to look at it from a different perspective, rather than the same old, same old. One of my bigger visions for the riding is to create the Artisans Trail. We've been in the Maritimes the past 3 summers, my family and I, and we went along Cabot Trail. And the thing that I really believe is that we have so many artists and artisans in this riding that don't have the support they should. I would like to make this a destination riding. Go through the entire riding, have a route mapped out. Yikes! And we can do it through the boost in tourism that Mr. Mulcair has put into our platform.
Just before Lorraine talks, I'm assuming Margaret and Rob will be having a long conversation after this. Just use the red cards. Sorry, Lorraine.
I think one of the biggest issues in the riding is the roundabouts. I just use that as an analogy for going around in circles. What I'm hearing from people in the community is actually a lot of cynicism, a lot of fatigue, voter fatigue. You know, I mean, there are serious issues, as we heard. We're talking about community security, we're talking about human security, we're talking about food security. People are concerned. They're absolutely terrified. And what I'm hearing is fear. I hear fear at the doorstep. I hear people who are afraid to change. They say, and pardon me, and I don't mean to be rude, what I hear over and over again, and I'm sure many of the other candidates have heard it, is that you could put a donkey, a cow, a horse, whatever, in the riding, paint it blue, and people will vote for it. I'm not trying to be rude. This is what I'm hearing in terms of a crisis when I talk about a democratic crisis, is that people are afraid to change. If they've done something that they've always done and they continue to do it over and over again, they're going to get the same results. So we propose, as the Greens, we want to talk about democratic reform, and we want to end this democratic crisis and get people back to the polls where they're not afraid to participate in their democracy. We are encouraging, again, that, you know, voters should go to the poll, especially in this election, because this is a definitive moment in our history. We are one of the last countries to change our voting system. We know we have a non-representative government. It is not democratic to have a first-past-the-post system where a member of parliament can actually go to parliament with just as many votes as people who didn't vote. Those voices are silent, and that's the crisis. So when I talk about community security, this is the fear that communities are not resilient. We understand that people are insecure. We have a crisis of murdered and missing Indigenous women in this country. We have isolation of seniors that can't, there's no transportation to get seniors back and forth to their children or grandchildren. And we are not investing in food security to protect and isolate ourselves from climate crisis. No, but what I'm suggesting is that the Green Party is saying we would like to work in cooperation with other parties, that we are prepared to cooperate and not use a divisive parliament, because we know we're going to end up going around in circles like those roundabouts.
Thank you all. Normally, we had formatted at this time we'd go back and do a kind of interaction between the candidates, but the way that the questions have been working, it gives them an opportunity, each of them an opportunity to address the issues, so we can go straight, I think, to the questions. Just to point out, each of the candidates has been given the same amount of time in terms of this period, and when it comes to these questions and answering them, everybody gets a minute, which is why it seems such a short period. In terms of questions, can we start with you, sir, if you don't mind, because you were up earlier and I sidelined you. And this was a local member.
Yeah, this is a local question, but I'm going to editorialize on a couple of things.
Very quickly. This is not a speech, right?
No, Cemex.
You and I know.
Cemex, that's genetic modification. Okay. I'll just go. I've worked in agriculture for 30 years, and I have a real keen interest in what happens locally. We clearly have to diversify. There is some way we've got to get more of our local product, our Canadian product, out there. We have to have an identity and sell it. And I know there are programs that can do it. You know, we have Foodlands Ontario and that sort of thing. I know there's a federal program. I've never seen any of it happen here. There might be, but what would you people do going across from my left to right? What do you see doing to spur agriculture, innovation, diversification, creating jobs here, and bringing money in through creating new markets?
When our government took over in 2006, we had trade agreements with 4 countries. We now have agreements with 42 countries, and we are now getting access to markets that we never had before, including the 300 million size European market. And this is an opportunity for our beef producers, our pork producers, our lamb producers, and others to go and sell their products. I can tell you, I talk to a lot of farmers on a regular basis. I regularly meet with the Federations of Agriculture in both Leeds and in Grenville, and they want us to continue to conclude those agreements so that they can get access for their beef and for their pork. So that is a way that we can work to get more jobs here and have more markets for our producers.
This is an issue that's really close to my heart. It's wonderful to say that we have these trade agreements, but nobody knows what's in them, and as far as I know, very few of them have actually been signed. So we can't wait for the federal government in this riding. This is why, as I was talking about the Artisans Trail, that's one element of it. But there's also, one of the things that I would like to suggest is Abbott Labs was one of the ideas I had before it was sold again. If we could bring in a research and development team in that building as well as a marketing team, people who are actually growing the food or producing things in agriculture, it's a different process than what, say, the milk processors are doing. But if you have a product that you want to create and market, we would have research and development to help you do that in the marketing program to help you market it. And I want to create, as I said before, a seal of excellence for Leeds Grenville and be able to open up the markets. I think that by... I talk too slow, maybe?
I'd like to thank you for your question. I think we really have to look at the impact of international trade agreements on what our vision is. And I really would like to thank you for sharing your vision about being a country that provides food to the world. It's an exciting opportunity in terms of innovation and development. We know we're watching the wage drive down. We're trying to compete with global manufacturing, and we're seeing our jobs offsourced to other countries where people are working for a lower and lower and lower wage, and it makes it difficult to compete. So if we can't compete, maybe we should change the game, or we should just find another game to play. I think we definitely have to make room in our supply management system so that farmers don't get arrested for selling their neighbor eggs. The Green Party is committed to upholding a food strategy and supporting food charters. We're going to stop subsidies to inefficient biofuel production. I'm done. Thank you.
Well, as someone who's had some involvement in the egg industry, I will tell you that when people get arrested for selling their neighbors' eggs, it's because they're selling them illegally and taking advantage of price systems that were built by an industry where people paid a lot of money to participate in it. And so I think I know the people you're talking about or the situation, and I firmly disagree that that was an issue. It was handled properly, and I would stand behind it because I was a director at the Egg Farmers of Ontario when that happened. Did you know that there are 65 egg farms left in the United States producing eggs for all of the population of the United States, apart from small ones that aren't on the map anymore? Supply management in this country actually allows the average egg farm in Canada to be 20 to 25,000 hens. And that, quite honestly, is a small farm in the grand scheme of agriculture today. And in terms of trade agreements, the CETA agreement provided access to the, the time is up. All right, we'll talk again.
Thank you. It's all a matter of discipline, really. You have to discipline politicians. Can I have the next question at the microphone, please?
Thank you, candidates, for giving us your time. I truly appreciate it. Right now, we have about 40,000 homeless youth in Canada, with about 6,000 youth looking for a safe place to stay tonight right here in Canada. North Grenville is not the exception. We refer about 6 youth a year to shelters. That's just from our youth centre alone, not from Salvation Army, so just our KYC statistics. And 3 go to shelters, the shelter in Prescott, about 3 a year, and the rest go to Ottawa. Our shelter in Prescott is doing a tremendous job, but it's only covering about half the need here in our county. We know that the longer youth are homeless, the more likely they are to be involved in the sex trade and have worse health care and life chances. How do you propose we tackle youth homelessness better than we are right now here in North Grenville?
Let me start with Margaret.
I've had the privilege to visit the Kemptville Youth Centre a couple of times, and I must say that the work that you do there is really tremendous. And so, you know, I guess what we have to do is we have to look out to the program that the Liberal Party is promoting in terms of bringing jobs and opportunities to the youth, and make sure that we get our fair share of it right here in Leeds Grenville and here in North Grenville. I think, too, that the agencies that are supporting our youth in terms of supplying them, well, whether you go to the food banks or the Kemptville Youth Centre or others, you know, there needs to be more support for the on-the-ground agencies that are looking after the disadvantaged in our community. And again, I would say that we have to look to the federal government as a proper funding partner for that. I believe the agencies do great work, and they are right there on the ground. They understand the issues. They just don't have all the resources they need to supply the services that are in demand. And we can't ignore the fact that there are children who are couch surfing across Leeds Grenville, because it is happening.
Thank you for the question. Yes, we do require an investment in youth in Leeds Grenville, and actually across Canada. I mean, we've got commitments in the Green Platform to look at how children are treated. We've got a recommendation from UNICEF to actually dedicate a person to children. So without a dedication of someone's time and energy, we all know that this is an issue that's not being addressed. So if it's identified, you know, through a person responsible in the federal government, things will happen. Aside from that, we've got a national housing strategy, and I feel very strongly personally about strategies because I believe they set goals and objectives, targets and criteria so that we can measure progress along the way. If we don't set out where we're going, we're never going to get there. Thank you.
I think one of the most important aspects of this is that 1/4 of all homeless youth are LGBTQ+, and the NDP party has an extensive platform for that community. You know, people don't understand that there are kids that are couch surfing all through the riding. It's not just in Kempville. There's a huge issue, and it requires being able to provide the services that these kids need first of all. And that means the mental health services as well as the social services, which have been cut back drastically. There has to be a point where you understand that what the economy has done to a lot of families has filtered down to the kids. And the kids are the ones that are left adrift a lot of the time. I believe that there should be absolutely several shelters in this riding for the youth, and I believe that within those shelters should be an opportunity for social services access as well as education access. And my time is up, but we can talk lots more about it.
Congratulations to the Kempville Youth Centre on all your efforts in this area. I know that you're one of the agencies of the United Way of Leeds in Grenville. I've been really proud to have raised almost $700,000 through Hockey Night in Leeds Grenville. That helps, and it helps change lives daily in our riding. But in terms of what the government has been doing to help in the homelessness area, in fact, we did have a candidate forum about 3 weeks ago about this down in Brockville. But what the government's been doing is we have been committing $119 million per year over 5 years for the homelessness partnering strategy. And this is a way that we're working with communities who have identified a need and be able to help those who are homeless.
Thank you. And we have another question, Mike.
Hi, so all of you have mentioned small business, and specifically, Margaret, you mentioned artisans. I was wondering why, despite having such an empty downtown area in Kempville, the federal government is allowing renters to get money due to it being unrentable when they just refuse to lower their rent, when there's a large population of artisans that could occupy those buildings.
That's an excellent question, and it's a question I've often asked myself. I'm not certain that it's the federal government that's allowing this. I think a lot of the municipalities are actually the ones who they will forgive taxes or they will lower taxes for landlords, but the problem is that there's no incentive for them to be renting out these properties, and the landlords tend to want exorbitantly high rents for these places. You know, a place like Delta, when you first drive into Delta and there's a series of storefronts that are older, they probably look about 100 years old, it would be glorious to see artisans or different people who want to run a store in that region and then be able to rent the apartment upstairs. It's a question of what we want to do within the riding, but I think that we first have to look at both the federal and the municipal elements of it. Is it that the federal government needs to provide more funding for artisans for things like a capital expense? We can talk about it more later.
Gord, do you want to go first?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Margaret is correct that it is a municipal issue in terms of taxes with vacant commercial space. But I think that this is an excellent idea if you can make it work. Throughout our riding, we have a number of facilities. In Gananoque, we have the visual artists of Gananoque, an area that have a storefront there. We've got the art scene in Spencerville, Galoo Gallery in Cardinal. There's lots of opportunity to do that, and I think that there could be potential support through the Eastern Ontario Development Program, and there could be some help in terms of some business mentoring to help a business like that get up and running.
Thank you very much for your question. As I listened to you, I thought about, you know, the municipal tax increases in terms of small businesses and how we've had to deal with bearing an increase in municipal tax. Because we go back, we always have to follow the money. We go right up to the federal government and look at those transfers to the provinces, and we see that provinces and municipalities are falling short. The Green Party is talking about 1% investment into infrastructure at the municipal level. So that it's an important point that you bring up about not investing in small business, not supporting small business, and we are committed as the Green Party to investing in small business. We believe that we should have a mixed economy. It should be diversified. We should support small, medium, and large-sized business. And also, you bring up the point of investing in arts and culture. And as we know, in the last decade, we have seen a scale back of funding to arts and culture, and we have to reinvigorate Canada by addressing that.
In my time on Brockville City Council, we had a number of questions raised about how to reinvigorate a downtown. We have the same issues in Brockville as Kempville clearly has here. I would suggest to you that it is true that it's the municipal taxes that are lowered because they're vacant, right? And there needs to be some incentive provided to the landlords to actually put, get a tenant back in there. One thing that we did in Brockville was we did have a facade improvement program that was put in front of landlords to give them some municipal money to help them improve the look of the outside of their buildings, especially the heritage buildings. And that definitely has helped rejuvenate the downtown. It's come back. The program has, and that's something that might be recommended to the North Grenville Municipal Council. But definitely there needs to be some money invested in giving landlords an incentive to put people into their locations. So thank you for that.
Okay, we want to leave time to the candidates to do their final presentation, so I'm going to ask this one last question. I should say a lot of the questions that I've been picking out here have already been asked and covered. This one, I suppose, was inevitable, and this is for each of you. And maybe we could start with Lorraine, and then Andrade, and then Margaret, and then Gord. Quite arbitrary. What is your position on the Energy East pipeline plans to run through North Grenville?
The Green Party is opposed to the Energy East pipeline, and I am also personally opposed to the pipeline. I have a well. I have a great respect for water. As an Indigenous woman, I actually have a responsibility to care for water. That's a sacred part of my responsibility and my culture. I believe the risk is too great, and it's an excuse to, continue on the fossil fuel path. If we have this huge infrastructure development, it's going to create a few short-term jobs. It's not a sustainable undertaking. It talks about moving oil out of the country for export in a very rapid fashion. So this gets to the heart of resource development. The Green Party supports sustainable resource development with a view to the next generation and looking at how we manage our natural resources to ensure that we're not exploiting the planet beyond its capacity. Thank you.
My view on the pipeline is that when you don't know what to do, you shouldn't do anything. So we need to take a step back. We need to get the scientists back to work. We need to have them do all their research. And there's been a lot of information floating around about this, both pro and con, mostly con. And I really think that we need to understand what the truth is. There is some serious concern about your water table, and that is an absolutely valid issue, and it needs to be well understood, because people also say that the most dangerous way to transport oil is by rail. And we know that that isn't a good idea either. So at the end of the day, we have to get all of the information, get some trust back into our energy regulators, who people think have been basically co-opted by the pipeline companies. Let's get some objective information back out there into the community, have consultation, and figure out what the right thing is to do, because we're not going to do anything that's going to put your water or your natural resources into jeopardy, but we also need to make sure that we can do what we need for industry as well. So,
this is a particularly difficult question to answer. The NDP's stance on pipelines are that nothing should be done until complete and total assessment has been done environmentally with our scientists, but we also need to have correct information from the pipeline companies and, more importantly, input from the communities. We have a bit of a problem here, and I'm going to be really honest on this. You've got the maritime provinces, most notably New Brunswick, who want a pipeline to come through because they can provide refining there, and then, of course, that will create more jobs in New Brunswick. This is a fact that we have to take into consideration. The other element is I don't believe that doing nothing is an answer. We must begin the assessment. I don't like that oil can be transported by rail. I lived in Mississauga during the 1979 derailment, and it was terrifying. So we'll talk about it later.
I agree that transporting oil by pipeline is much safer than by rail, and we've seen a disaster in Quebec that killed many people. We see other railway issues throughout the United States where we have some accidents that are causing some serious damage. But with that said, I know this is an important issue in North Grenville. We need to make sure that all the safety precautions are in place. There's a process currently undergoing with the National Energy Board. It's an arm's length agency that's responsible for reviewing these pipelines. And in June, we just passed the new Federal Pipeline Safety Act. And what it does is it gives complete liability to these pipeline companies. They have to put up $1 billion to make sure that the safety is there, and if there is an accident, that they're covered. As well, the liability is now going to be complete. They are going to take full responsibility. So it's, these pipeline companies are going to be held to account if there's ever an accident. And I know that everybody's concerned about the environment, and we need to make sure that the proper process is carried out.
Thank you. That's the end of the questioning, and I can assure you, going through the questions here, that we have covered just about every topic that came up in the questions. And if yours wasn't directly covered, I'm hoping it was dealt with at least obliquely, and maybe in this last round. The candidates now have a few minutes each to sum up their position, and the arrangement as it came out is that Mary Jean goes first, then Gord, then Lorraine, then Margaret, and it's 4 minutes each. Okay, so if we start then with Mary Jean.
Well, first I'd like to thank you all for your attention tonight and for those great questions. This is a very important election for Canada, and I think the number of people who have come out here tonight speaks to how important it is to all of you. It's inevitable that there's going to be a range of views, but I think that's what Canadian democracy is all about. What people are looking for is they're looking for a new government, a government that's going to allow them to exchange those views or hear them exchanged in Parliament. They're looking for, here in Leeds Grenville, the voice of Leeds Grenville to be carried to Ottawa and not Ottawa's voice in Leeds Grenville. I'm in this race because I've lived most of my life in Leeds Grenville. I was born and raised in Lynn and grew up in, went to high school in Brockville and went away to school and became a lawyer and came back. And Ian and I raised our children here, and we're very lucky to live here, very proud to live here. And in addition to raising my children and raising our children and working in my law practice, I've also had the privilege of working out in the community. And I've done quite a lot of hard work in the community because it was asked of me in many ways, and because it was an opportunity, and it's just there to be done. My mom used to say, you got to do your bit. And so I've been out there doing my bit in the community and trying to make things better. And now all of Leeds Grenville has become home to me, and I'm looking forward to the opportunity to providing leadership and bringing whatever skills I may have to bear to make things better here in North Grenville, in addition to the other parts of the riding. It really is a values-based election. It's about your vision for Canada. What do you see your country to be? Is this government representative of your view of Canada? I would suggest to you that most people here in this room and most people out in Leeds Grenville would like to see a different vision of Canada executed. We would like to see compassion restored to government. We would like to see an investment in Canada. We would like to see leadership. And that's what I would like to bring to Leeds Grenville. That's what I'd like to take to Ottawa. And I really would appreciate your support in doing that. So on October 19th, I hope you'll mark your ballot for Mary Jean McFall. Thank you very much.
Thanks again to the North Grenville Times. Folks, I started in politics to help make a difference in my community and in my region. I wanted to help build a community where ideas can grow into thriving businesses, where inspiration can take root, and where our children and our families can live safely and comfortably. I'm pleased to say the theme of my campaign is leadership that delivers. I'm proud of my record representing the people of this riding in Ottawa, and I'm proud of my record of getting things done for this riding. For the past 11 years, I've been meeting with constituents, listening to constituents, taking their concerns to Ottawa, and delivering on their priorities. Our government has been listening to our constituents and delivering on our priorities. You needed stable long-term economic development money, and I delivered. Our communities needed stable long-term infrastructure money, and we delivered. When the Rideau Canal was threatened by Parks Canada's policies, I delivered. You wanted the gun registry eliminated, and we delivered. You needed a new library here in North Grenville, and I delivered. Our border infrastructure needed to be renewed, and I delivered. Our historic and cultural resources needed financial assistance, and I delivered again. Parents of critically ill children needed help, and more research needed to be done on autism and dementia, and I delivered. Money was needed to retrain older workers and for education and training opportunities for youth, and we delivered. You demanded more money for health care, and we delivered again. You asked us for safe communities and a secure stand on the world stage, and we delivered. Our stable majority government of the past 4 years allowed us to conduct the most productive parliament in many decades. More government bills were passed, and despite what you hear and see in the media, backbenchers wielded more influence as more private members' bills were passed than ever before. More substantial committee work was accomplished than ever before, and all of this happened at less cost. And the result is a balanced budget, the lowest federal taxes in over 50 years, and one of the best economies in the world. We have 1.3 million net new jobs, our infrastructure is being renewed, our businesses are growing, innovation is booming, opportunity is all around us. We fought to bring Canada back from the tax and spend era of the previous government, and we do not want to return to those days. We don't want a new long gun registry, and make no mistake, the opposition parties voted to keep it, and there's only one way to guarantee it doesn't return, and that is with a conservative government. We don't want our military to be ignored and stripped of its resources like the decade of darkness just before we came to office. And we've all heard the Liberal leader's jokes about our military. We've also heard his tax scam theory about our hardworking small businesses. No wonder they're concerned about auditors. And we don't want cuts to healthcare funding like the previous government made. And we sure don't want higher taxes and deficits like the opposition are promising. We don't want clawbacks on our tax-free savings accounts, the loss of income splitting, and a reduction in the amount of child care money we receive. I'm asking you to make sure you encourage others and you to go to the polls and vote for Gord Brown so in another 4 years we can say once again, our leadership has delivered.
You have 4 minutes? I'd like to thank you very much for inviting me to participate as a Green Party candidate. Tonight, Elizabeth is being excluded from the national debate, which I think is a shame. There was over 1 million Canadians who voted Green in 2011. And it's sad that the media is controlling the messaging in terms of this national election. I'm happy to be here as a Green candidate, and I want you to know that I'm a viable option when you go into the ballot box. I hope I demonstrated a knowledge of the issues to your satisfaction, that you would seriously consider voting Green. I talk about Green being the party of the future. And, I talk a lot about new technologies and moving and transitioning into a new economy for the future. I'm a grandmother. I'm raising my grandchildren. Well, I'm not raising my grandchildren, but I'm living close to where my grandchildren are being raised, and I'm proud to be here. What drives me into politics as a grandmother is recognizing that we're seeing a concentration of power. We see large parties that are mired in old ideologies that probably don't have the wherewithal to change. And the Greens are bringing a new vision to Canada. We're bringing optimism and hope, and we're bringing a promise to work in collaboration. We're a party that doesn't whip our votes. So as a Green Member of Parliament, I am not obligated to toe the party line. We have heard that members of Parliament in this current government have been silenced, and we know there's a command and control central for messaging out of the PMO's office. We have seen the budget of this office increase like never before in the history of this country. We have seen silence. We have seen a lack of debate. We have seen omnibus bills, prorogation, can't even say the word. You know what I mean, not pierogies, prorogation of Parliament. It's frightening to me. These are signals. If we watch this trend of losing our diplomatic corps, not investing in foreign affairs, not taking diplomatic measures or practicing humanitarian means, and instead of acting like humanitarian Canadians, we have a military mission in Syria. So these are signals to me that something is rotten at the core in the House of Commons. And I believe it's time to change government, to stop voting, conservative and liberal majorities. We know that in a majority government it doesn't work well. And I talked about first past the post and how ineffective and undemocratic it actually is. The Greens are committed to reforming our electoral system so that we have every voice of every Canadian represented in Parliament, so that we don't have a disparity, we don't have an income gap like what we have now, where Party X caters to the certain part of the electorate just to get votes and offer tax cuts to the rich to get their votes. We're proposing a Parliament that has something for everyone. So on October 19th, I really would like you to go into that ballot box, because it's really secret and dark in there. And don't be afraid. Don't be afraid because it's dark in the ballot box. Have the courage to vote Green. Have the courage to vote for change. Be good.
I take a somewhat different view than most of my colleagues here. When my husband and I lived in Edmonton or in Alberta, we moved to a small town. And as I did, I began to go to the council meetings. And I discovered that the councillors had not changed in 20 years and that there were very questionable things happening within that council. And because we had made the investment to purchase a home in that town, I decided to find out if everybody else in that town felt as worried as I did. And I called a public meeting, and I was shocked because over 100 people showed up at that meeting. They didn't know who I was. I sent a flyer out to everybody's mailbox, and what we were able to accomplish was we were able to replace every single councillor except for one on that council. We were able to stop corrupt practices. We were able to stop the fact that the people in the town had no clue what was really going on with their council. Now, I tell you this because I believe in a grassroots element here. I was really shocked to discover that some of the local leaders who have been here for quite a while were laughing in my face when I said, I think we have a pretty good chance of winning this riding. They think that we're a joke, and I am shocked and appalled. But I've been through this before. I've seen it. What people need to understand is that what you believe in really does matter. I want my Canada back. I am tired of the disparity in this country. It is not acceptable. I don't think we need to go into debt, and I don't think we need to make a surplus on the backs of those less vulnerable. There is a balanced and even way for us to come out of this, I would say, 20 years of just a miasma of grief. It bothers me to see that we have so little respect for the people who worked to create this country. Our seniors are to be respected and honored. It bothers me that our military is not supported the way it should be, and yet we are considered a hawkish nation. It bothers me that we are embarrassed on the international scene. To run a government on any kind of ideological values is so wrong in Canada. Canada, the church and state are completely separate and apart. I had a woman come up to me at the Spencerville Fair this weekend, and she said to me, "I'm a conservative." And I said, "That's great." I said, "Did you have any questions for me and my party?" And we had a conversation that rambled on. She made sure that I understood that she wasn't afraid to say what she thought. And then she started talking about the Syrian refugees. And she said, "I don't want these foreigners here taking jobs from our Canadians." And I said, "Well, the problem is that we don't have jobs for our Canadians, and I think compassion should rule over that." Then she told me, "Well, I have a solution for it all." And she looked me in the eye and she told me, "Give the Israelis enough bullets." I refuse as a daughter of an immigrant family to accept that this could be any kind of an attitude that would represent my writing and my country. We have to... It is so important that we step up and reclaim Canada. I believe in the NDP party, and I really hope that other people understand how important it is to make this change in our government this time. Thank you.
Thank you all. I hope that tonight you've been able to see 4 individuals behind party and behind platforms and behind brochures, a chance to see individuals and judge them for what they are. I would like you to join me in thanking 4 honourable people for standing up and getting to be part of the system and helping us to make a choice in governing ourselves. So thank you to each of the 4 of you very much. Before you leave, it's been an honour for the North Grenville Times to be able to put this on. I hope it has shown that not all media are nasty and bad guys. And lastly, it's been a genuine delight and pleasure for me to get to sit in this chair. Thank you all very much for coming. Merci beaucoup. Thank you. Bye-bye.